Hey guys, welcome back to another Q&A video on February 14th, 2020. And this week I was actually able to condense it down a little bit more to a more reasonable size, not a 35 minute video. So hopefully this one's a little bit better. Mostly just open Q&As lately. I always get a variety, so we'll go with that for now. First question. Let's see. How to train around elbow tendinitis and how to prevent it. Okay, well, first things first, training around it is not really doing movements that irritate it, or at least limiting the weight on those movements, trying to do things that could potentially increase your potential for tension with a little less weight. So things like maybe exaggerating eccentrics, slow eccentrics, or just slower tempo overall, or modifying the range of motion in a way that might help. Anything that would reduce the amount of weight that you need, training at a less advantageous angle even will help. So like elbow tendinitis, for example, it's going to be hard to do tricep pressing or tricep movements. Well, you could even do something like BFR training here. This is a situation where it would work well. It's going to drastically reduce the load. It's probably going to help with neural connection because you're going to have a lot of just metabolite buildup in the muscle. You're going to be able to feel a lot better, use less weight. Pressing is going to be hard. So, you could have difficulty with chest pressing movements. Then that's going to require more weight. So things that don't move the elbow joint a whole lot, or even pre-exhausting with things that don't move the elbow joint a lot. So flies, or maybe a hex press that's a little bit shorter range of motion, or even like pullover movements that are pec dominated pullover movements, and then like I said, modifying tempos to slow things down. There's a lot of things you can do to reduce it and reduce the load on that joint. Depending on how bad it is, you might need to just not train it initially to get some of the inflammation down, but it really just depends. Treating it, that's part of the treatment, obviously. Also things like certain peptides could potentially help. TB500, BPC 157 is a little more localized than that, so that could be applied close to the area. It would potentially help. The TB's more so systemic, but preventing it, well, you need to look at what the culprit is. Is it just an overuse issue? Are you doing a certain movement pattern repetitively, whereas maybe, and it's just kind of irritating it for that reason? Is your not range of motion, I guess your path of motion isn't good? Are you not tracking correctly? So you look at that. That could potentially be irritating it. Oftentimes it's imbalances further up the chain, you know what I mean? So maybe you have a weak musculature somewhere and it's putting a lot of force on the elbow. You're going through range of motion wrong. Here's the thing about range of motion when you're training too, is if you're staying in the active range of motion where the muscle's pretty much active the whole time, it's going to be a lot less taxing on the joint. So for a pressing movement, not going into full lockout, not dropping down so low where you lose tension on your pecs. It's not training in just quarter reps, but training in a reasonable active range of motion that's going to keep tension on the muscle, and that's going to take a lot of burden off the joint. Doing things that feel more natural to you, not forcing movements that put your joints in a compromised position that they're not able to work through properly. Doing things like, if you just really have poor range of motion, and this isn't just elbow tendinitis, it could be, shoulders, knees, whatever. Doing things like joint capsule stretches that can help open up the joint, make it move through a better range of motion. So there's a lot of things you can do. I'd probably try to just figure out what the culprit is, first and foremost. Astragalus should be used, with all AAS cycles or just when using orals. Um, well, look at the person. So it doesn't really matter. I mean, it can be used for anyone that wants to. In this case, I'm assuming they're asking about the benefit to kidney health. It can be used by anyone that wants to improve kidney health if they have if they have kidney markers that are off for any reason. It doesn't really have to be somebody that's enhanced. It can be anyone, really. Now, there are certain compounds that are metabolized more heavily by the kidneys. It's not just orals. I mean, it really just depends. But again, it would really be based on the person. There's people that are enhanced that their kidney function is fine with no matter what they use. It's fine. They're hydrated. They never have any issues. The markers are never off. I see that. Okay. I see other people that are impacted much, much worse, and they might want to use something like this. So it really just depends. And it does have other benefits too. It's kind of like a general adaptogenic herb. In terms of immune health, it helps. So, it really just depends. Like I said, do you need it? Do you not need it? How much is it going to benefit you? So kind of, you're going to know. If you do lab work and you've done lab work in different situations and you kind of know what those values look like, you're going to know if you're that person or not. You should. So that's the best answer I can really give. All right, next one. Let's see. Dante Trudell has mentioned before that blood donations and attempting to keep CBC in range, so complete blood counts. So this things like hematocrit, hemoglobin, red blood cell count, maybe iron levels, so on and so forth, can actually exacerbate the issue in the long term due to the body's compensating from the regular loss of blood. I've searched for literature on this, but have found nothing. You believe there's any validity to this? That is a really good question, and I think I talked about this on a Q&A one other time, maybe. Probably it was a while ago though. I don't know if you could jump on PubMed. I don't know that there's any studies on this because it really depends on the person. Now, if you look up just basic information on regeneration of red blood cells, you'll find a range. There's some, it can be millions of cells per second. All right. It's a lot. How many do you lose in a blood donation? I'm sure it's millions and millions and millions, I would assume. Now, with that said, regeneration rate can be affected by a couple different things. And then obviously certain things that you might be ingesting can impact that as well. At least like the total count, blood viscosity, size of the red blood cells, like all those things. So what I would have to say is you're going to have to try it and see what happens. Now, the reason I know this is because I ran into this personally and I talked to my doctor about it. And yeah, he confirmed this, that there are a good number of people, especially that donate on a very regular basis, that do have that end up having higher blood counts because they are regenerating faster and faster and faster. I'm sure there's a ceiling. Obviously, it's not just going to keep speeding up, but they are compensating and they end up with higher blood counts. So this happened to me. I noticed that. Wow, initially my blood counts go down, right? Well, yeah, obviously, because if I were to get lab work done right after I donated blood, it would be, you would see a difference, sure. Now, I was noticing that it wasn't lasting very long, well, because regeneration is very quick, and it also was getting worse over time. So I went without it. I talked to my doctor about it, someone I trust a lot on pretty much anything. And yeah, he said that's exactly what happens. So, I don't donate anymore. I literally haven't donated in a couple years at least. I might occasionally donate just to donate to a blood drive, but I don't donate every 2 months like I used to. And my hematocrit's always normal, my hemoglobin's always normal, just my overall CBC type, like on my red blood cell counts, they're always normal. Whereas before I was just struggling to keep them in range, even with certain supplements and things like over-the-counter stuff to try to help. I just wasn't having much luck. So yeah, he's right. Dante's right on that. I mean, it definitely does exacerbate the issue in a lot of people, and I think probably more in the people that donate on a very regular basis. They're probably going to be the people that are a little more susceptible to it because they're just constantly regenerating red blood cells. There is some information out there on it. I don't know if you'll be able to find like any official studies on it, probably because it's not going to be the same person to person. Studies might not really help. But yeah, yep, definitely validity to that. All right, let's move on. Move over to Instagram. Thoughts on Miracle Noodles or similar products? Okay, so yeah, I've used these a ton like over the years. I mean, pretty much every prep when calories get super low, I use them. A couple downsides. It's konjac flour is the main thing, and it's, oh shit, if I can even say it, glucomannan or something fiber. I can't even remember the exact name. Let me look. Let me punch in Miracle Noodle. Yeah, glucomannan. But, you know, either way. Anyhow, main thing, it is a soluble fiber. So soluble fiber means water, means it can pull water into the GI tract. Now, there are some other benefits to this in that we know that some soluble fibers, it kind of depends on the type, but they do ferment in the colon or lower GI, and that can, you know, so they aren't completely, they don't completely pass undigested. So some of them do have some digestion properties, whereas insoluble fiber pretty much just passes through. Now, it's said that this type of fiber is not digested, at least to an extremely low percent. So what I typically do for me personally is I count about a quarter of it. So let's say like a pack, like a pack of the noodles or rice. Sometimes I use a rice because it's kind of like in rice pieces and it's easy to throw in. Excuse me. It'll be, you know, maybe like 8 grams of fiber per package. I'll do like half a pack twice a day. So it's 4 and 4. I'd count 1 gram in there, like 1 gram of fiber, you know, or 1 gram of carb. I know that seems insignificant. People that are on no carb or like super low carbs and like sub 1500 calories, I mean, all that stuff matters. So, you know, that's what I do with it personally in terms of tracking it. That's how I always did it. But yeah, I didn't have any problems with it as long as I just kept the amount reasonable. Never bothered me. And that's going to probably be the theme for anyone. I mean, if you're taking in large amounts, you'll notice that it probably comes out in your stool and things like that. You're just not digesting it, and which is okay because you don't want to digest it. But as long as it's not upsetting your stomach, you're not pulling too much fluid in, causing any issues. Yeah, it's a good little filler. They don't really have much taste. They do have that kind of weird smell if anyone's used any similar products like this. It's like shirataki or however you say it, noodles. They don't smell good, but you can rinse them and then throw them in. They're pretty easy to use. I like them. Personally, I use them like all the time. I mean, people think it's weird, but if you've ever eaten super duper low calories for extended periods of time, you know, get a little creative. So yeah, I don't see anything wrong with them. And they make all kinds of different varieties. Like I like the fettuccine ones because the noodles are a little bit bigger and it's, I don't know, just a little bit tastier. So there's some different varieties. I usually get like a variety pack or multi-packs on Amazon or on their actual Miracle Noodle website or something like that because it's cheaper. And yeah, they're good. They're fine. As long as, just like I said, just watch digestion, just be reasonable with the amount. It's easy to get carried away because they're practically no calories. So you could use like bowls and bowls of them. But yeah, be careful. All right. Any advice on how to heal or speed up the recovery of bicep tear? Supplements, food, or other recommendations for proper recovery? Well, it depends on the tear. I mean, if it's a complete tear, something that requires surgery, then you're gonna have to do that. Now, if it's like a smaller tear that you're not having any surgery on, well, there's a few things. I mean, for one, I wouldn't be under eating severely when trying to recover anything, because, building, repairing, synthesizing, metabolizing, whatever words, like anything that's kind of like an anabolic type process or like a building type process will require energy. And so being in an energy deficit probably isn't a good idea. So keep that in mind. Peptides can help. The peptides I mentioned earlier, for if you're doing not systemic, localized here, the BPC 157 can help. There's different dosings on this. You see like certain mg per kilo type doses and stuff. It's going to be like 2 to 6, 800 mcgs daily, or split up twice a day type of thing. You're going to be in that range depending on your body, depending on your size. But there is research on that, so you can kind of look it up and find it. Supplements, anything that might help. Like I like the Orthogen joint connective tissue product from Orthogen. I use it all the time, and especially people that have joint issues or are recovering from joint issues. Sorry about my dog here. I'll use that because it does help with connective tissue repair, helps with lubrication, synovial fluid, all those things. So it's going to be a helpful product. But yeah, calorie surplus, that product works. Peptides, keeping it going through certain ranges of motion so it continues to heal and pump the nutrients into the muscle. Things like compression, there's a lot of things. Talk to a physical therapist, honestly. Like if you want rehab exercises and stuff, actually prescribed you from somebody can evaluate your range of motion and strength and all that stuff, and actually give you a good regimen for that. I don't want to sit here because I really don't know anything about the tear. I don't want to sit here and say, do this exercise, this range of motion, that's stretching or whatever. Like that's not really my place, especially when I don't know anything about the injury. So, but those are just some general recommendations. All right. How to train around elbow tendonitis. Oh, well, I answered that one already. I don't know if this is the same person asking the same question on Instagram and Facebook, but yeah, I got that one already. How to take your off season to the next level. Like adding really good amount of lean tissue. Time. Time's the first one. That's the biggest thing. Sufficient time, and man, it's gonna vary person to person. Like everyone's ability to put on muscle. There's so many genetic variables there. There's so many environmental variables there. Age, hormone profile. Oh man, there's just a lot of things that can really change the amount of muscle that someone can gain in a certain period of time. Now, but yeah, time is going to be a big factor. Also, being progressive. So many people, their off seasons aren't progressive. Like they don't have a scheme of progression. It doesn't necessarily have to be complicated. Like it can be a number of things, but we know certain variables help with hypertrophy, volume, progressive overload being the two main ones. Now, like figure out something that you can stick to and that you can progress with. If it's a very simple plan that allows progressive overload, that's great. Like because you can progress on it for a regular, on a regular basis, and then when you stop, you can change exercises or you can change the plan. You can reset. You can restart progression. There's a number of ways. There's a number of ways that do it, but you have to have something that you can actually track and something that you can build upon. Same with nutrition. It's going to be progressive. You can't, if you're not, okay, so I know people, I don't want to sit here and tell people to chase the scale, but if you're never gaining weight, you're probably not gaining muscle. Or at least it's going to be brutally slow. It depends on, if you want to add a lot of lean tissue, we're talking like jump weight classes and stuff like that. Yeah, you're going to gain weight. You have to gain weight. Now, a lot of people get afraid of body fat. I get that. Now, I do find once we have just kind of a sufficient amount of body fat, we tend to be able to gain muscle at and around that kind of body fat range for a good amount of time, as long as you don't go too fast. So don't make your surplus too big. Your surplus doesn't need to be a bajillion calories per day. Like I had a question the other day. I'm eating, because my training days are like 7,200 calories. My non-training is almost like 5,000. I mean, it's a lot. It's so much food. Someone asked me if they thought the surplus needed to be so big because they've seen that other people said it shouldn't, which I agree with that. I'm not gaining weight that fast is a thing. I'm gaining like 1 to 3 pounds in a month, maybe 4 pounds in a really productive month. It's slow because my surplus isn't that big, because again, you're only going to build muscle so quickly. So don't be in a huge surplus. That's going to help slow down and mitigate and at least stave off things like insulin resistance and gaining a ton of body fat, tons of inflammation. I mean, all that. So modest surplus, that's going to be so much different for so many different people. It's really going to depend on the person. But you're going to have to gain weight. Like your body weight's going to have to go up on a consistent basis. But it needs to be strategic. It needs to be at a certain pace. It doesn't need to be super fast. You're not, maybe right after a show, like if you're starting in a lean state, that's awesome. That's a great place to start. You're going to get, you're in a good position. If you're a little depleted from there, yeah, you might gain 10, 20 pounds in the first month or two. Great. But you're not going to gain 10 or 20 pounds a month every single month. And if you are gaining 10 pounds a month, you're going to be fat as shit in a matter of, I don't know, 3 or 4 months. It's not going to, you're just not going to have that productive of a season. So I think like I competed in, I don't know, June or July. And it's February. I mean, literally I haven't come out. I haven't had to go into a deficit to clean anything up for 8 months. And that's gaining 50 pounds. It's just because I've gone slow, really slow. I've been progressive. I've monitored my blood glucose. I've kept all that in check. And everything's been strategic and I've been patient. So that's what I would say in terms of actually being able to track and monitor progress and going and doing those things. Now, obviously that's like a really oversimplified way of looking at things. There's going to be roadblocks along the way. You're going to get obstacles. It's not going to just be super smooth and easy all the time. And there's going to be some strategy in there, and there's going to be, or a lot of strategy. It's not like I don't just tell my client like, oh yeah, get a little bit stronger each week and we'll be good, and add a little bit of food here and there. Like, nah, there's definitely more to it than that for the majority of people. But that's the premise. I mean, that's the premise of it. The details are just icing, right? And once you can do that, then a lot of it's just mindset. Like, I just don't think people are willing to eat when they're not hungry, when they're really freaking uncomfortable, eat when they do it for months on end. I don't think people are willing to train progressively when the weights get heavier and heavier and they get really scary and it gets really hard. And it's monotonous, all this stuff. Yeah, and there's a lot of people that are consistent. They're consistently doing the wrong stuff, though. They're just not getting any better. And I'm kind of going off on a tangent. It's the last question anyhow, but I know a lot of people say that, off season, the training's the easiest part. It's the eating that's hard. Or off season, the training's the easiest part. Or I just said that. Are the eating's the easiest part, the training's the hard part, or whatever, vice versa. It's all hard when you get deep into it and you're really trying to push your body to like beyond its limits and gain amounts of muscle tissue that are very unnatural to you. It's all hard. You're gonna be not hungry. You're not gonna be hungry. The training's gonna be really freaking difficult. It's like, in order to keep progressing, it's gonna be really tough. So do that. You do those things, and you're gonna gain tissue, and then a lot of it is psychological, and obviously monitoring health in there. If you can stay healthy or healthier, the better, the better off you're going to be, the longer the off season is going to be. People don't look at longevity, and they're so focused, they're so short-sighted that muscle, that productive off season, it's not in 2 months. It's not how much weight you gain in 2 months. That's not it. It's, can you keep yourself together for a year and a half, 2 years, doing it over and over again, not falling apart, not breaking down as much, not having to pull back as often, not getting sick all the time, not being super stressed all the time, monitoring your blood work, monitoring lab work, doing all these things. That's what's going to keep you progressing over the long period of time. That's what's actually going to accumulate. So hope that's helpful, and I will cut it here, and we'll talk to you guys next time.